Good morning, monster fans and Halloween enthusiasts. It's time once again for Creepy Cheapies with Dr. Lady. I'm Bozo the Clown, and let's get right down to brass tacks. Here are the brass tacks, and I believe some of the tacks in this jar are actually made of other substances as well, including possibly aluminum, I think, and maybe some other unidentified metals and alloys in there. But anyway, there are some brass tacks in there. So let's get on with today's mask story, which involves an older film and a mask that I think is pretty great, pretty spectacular, you might say, or you might not. If you grew up in the United States and watched late night television back in the 1970s and 80s, you probably were exposed to some martial arts movies, which were often humorously referred to as chopsocky movies. You might remember those late at night. That was back when they used to show older stuff and more interesting stuff from around the world on TV. Now they pretty much just show American stuff made in the last 8 years. But trust me, there was a time when you could stay up late at night and see martial arts movies, and you may have seen some over the years, and if you saw any in America, you've probably been exposed to the work of Shaw Brothers Studios. Shaw Brothers was a very phenomenally successful motion picture studio in China. I believe it was around since as far back as the silent era, but for many years Shaw Brothers continued to turn out successful martial arts movies, or as we called them back then, karate movies, or kung fu movies, or judo, that kind of thing, you know, with all the fighting and the kicking and jumping and such. And they had different sort of plots and different moral lessons, and took place in different settings and different time periods. But many people in America are not fond of those movies, and you know, it's easy to make fun of that stuff today, but gotta tell you, even though I don't particularly care about watching footage of guys fighting per se, I have always had a healthy respect for those movies, because the guys who did the fighting in the Shaw Brothers martial arts movies were really doing that stuff right in front of the camera. They didn't have computers back then to provide two-dimensional looking computer cartoon versions of the stars all wobbling and whipping around and bopping around on camera for you. There were guys actually doing those fight scenes, and of course it was enhanced from time to time with some camera tricks and some clever editing, but for the most part you were actually seeing guys jumping and kicking and fighting like that, trying to look like they're attempting to kill each other, but they're not actually literally wanting to kill each other because they're acting. That's pretty spectacular. The jumping and kicking and fighting just requires such athleticism and grace and skill, and it's amazing that anybody is able to do that. And today a lot of movies do it with cartoon animation to look like the real people jumping around. But back then, everything you saw in those movies actually took place right in front of a camera with guys actually doing it, and that's very impressive. And meanwhile, in the 60s and 70s, Hammer Films in Great Britain was doing spectacularly good business as well, with all their horror movies about vampires and Frankenstein monsters and other spooky things that guys like you and me like, okay? And inevitably the two finally came together in 1974 for something called Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. A movie that I think was kind of ahead of its time, because at that time horror movies mostly were sort of somber and dreamlike and funereal, and weren't really like action-packed adventure kind of plots like we have today. Today we're used to seeing vampires and zombies and so forth who can fight and kickbox and jump around and run around and have like action adventure superhero stuff with our horror content, but not so much back then. So it was kind of a breakthrough movie, and I think it was a terrifically good movie. Whether you like the kung fu fighting or whether you like the horror stuff, it gave the audience a lot of each of those. It gave you a lot of fighting and amazingly elaborately choreographed fight scenes and tons of great footage of atmospheric, spooky lighting and creepy cobwebbed crypts. That was a pretty good phrase, wasn't it? Creepy cobwebbed crypts. And I even said it twice. Creepy footage of zombies coming up out of the ground and vampires coming out of graves and blood and kind of a lot of death and violence, and the wonderful, one-of-a-kind Peter Cushing making it all seem believable in spite of some, rather extreme situations and plot twists. He sells it. So if you haven't seen that movie, I say look for it. I thought it was great. But the even greater thing is that today there are, 7.6 billion humans in the world, and out of those, I think the number who remember that film from 1974, Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, probably numbers about 206. And from those, we have to subtract those who never saw the film but heard of it, those who didn't like it, those who don't collect masks, those who think it wouldn't make a good mask to have something from that movie, those who think it would be good to have a mask of something from that movie, but only if they could get it for $12 at Spirit Halloween. You whittle that number down and you finally end up with the number of people who would like to have a mask that's really nice of one of the monsters from Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, and you get about 14 people. Okay? And that's why it's so awesome that Trick or Treat Studios did this mask, because nobody in his right mind would license this mask and put it out there on the shelves with all the masks that are of famous monsters, Freddy Krueger and Frankenstein and Wolfman and Darth Vader and all the heavy hitters, the Michael Myers. Everybody wants one of those. How many people want one of these? Not many. It's the Golden Vampire. Sounds like an award, doesn't it? Allow me to present you with the Golden Vampire for best editing. Never mind. The Golden Vampire, as seen here, is one of, and now if you paid attention when I mentioned the title of the film, you might have caught on that there's actually more than one of these guys in the movie. There's a number of golden vampires that you see jumping and kicking and crawling and attacking throughout the movie. And this replica of one of them is one of the 2020, is that right? Yeah. The 2020 season releases from Trick or Treat Studios, sculpted by a human named Noah Rivers, I believe, and beautifully done. This really looks a lot like what you saw in the movie if you were one of the 35 people who are alive today who saw the movie. Look for it on wherever you watch old movies. Anyway, let's get a look at this guy. It's the Golden Vampire. Wow. And I just heard some smart aleck say, that's not a golden vampire, that's a purpley gray vampire in a gold mask. Well, you got me there. Technically you're correct. However, bear in mind that if they had called the film Legend of the Seven Purpley Gray Vampires in Gold Masks, it really would have taken up too much space on the marquee back in the day. And, not all those 42nd Street theater owners had enough extra letters to spell all that out. So they went with Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Yeah, stick with me. You learn stuff. Anyway, look at this monstrosity. Now this is very much like what they look like in the film, and you do in the movie see a little beyond the face on some of them. They wear robes. Now in the film they jump around and run around and attack and are kind of, they turn into bats, they leap at people, they fight with swords, they do all sorts of scary things, and there are some different looks to them. They don't all have white hair. 2 or 3 of them have white hair, 2 or 3 of them have black hair, 2 or 3 of them have sort of dusty gray brownish hair, so it's hard to tell. Likewise, the masks that they wear are slightly different, but pretty much like this. Obviously their dental work wouldn't be identical on all of them, but this is what most of them look like. And it occurred to me, how cool would it be, okay, maybe nobody thinks it's cool but me, I think it would be cool, if you had 7 of these masks, take the hair off of some of them and replace it with grayish brown and black hair, so you have some with all the different colors. Put some in the white robes like some of them wear in the movie, some of them wear brown clothes that are top and pants, and other sorts of tunics and things, and black robes. Put them together. You could make the whole army of the 7 golden vampires out of just this one mask because the faces are so similar. That said, there is one glaring continuity error in the movie regarding this headband that they wear. See, on top of the golden mask, they wear the metal headband that holds back their wild and unruly runaway hair that they have. This is how they would do it in the rotting vampire shampoo commercial. See, just like that. Okay, and you could replace this hair with different colored hair and have different vampires. Not crazy about the hair. I am not a fan of this cheap plastic hair that all the masks these days have, that has this kind of kinky look to it. But although it doesn't work on most masks for me, it's kind of not bad on this one. Obviously the hair in the movie does not have quite this kinky look to it. It's more straight. But this has the right heft and weight and thickness, and it kind of works. Even though it's not 104% movie accurate, it really captures the look of what you see in the movie. And again, you could replace this, and I don't know if I want it replaced or not, because it looks pretty good and it's pretty generous. They at least make it nice and thick and didn't just stick one row on there hanging down that would be skimpy like you might expect of a mass-produced factory mask. This one actually has a nice head of hair that flops around realistically and adds enough bulk to make him look like they look in the movie. And this doesn't come off. This is all one piece. This is sculpted all together, so you can't take the gold mask off. If you want to be a golden vampire yourself and not have this whole monster part, that you will have to buy one of these and sacrifice it to the altar of scissors or X-Acto knife and cut out the gold mask and wear it and do your own makeup and put teeth in. You could do that. You also get to see a lot of these guys die in the movie. You get to see them with blood on their teeth, and then you get to see them sort of melt. And again, no computers back then. They actually built corpses and skeletons and things and sort of deflated them when the monsters finally get their comeuppance and meet their doom in the movie, which is pretty cool. And also, in addition to the golden vampires, or purpley gray vampires in gold masks, in addition to them, you get a whole graveyard full of zombie fighters, guys who look a lot like in The Blind Dead. Have you seen The Blind Dead? You know those movies? There are 4 of them. And then some unofficial ones, but 4 in the original series of The Blind Dead movies, where they are sort of rotted skeleton characters in hoods. They're kind of a favorite monster of mine, The Blind Dead. In fact, during Horror Hotel, they sort of became an unofficial mascot for Horror Hotel just because I like the look of those monsters. Most of the years of Horror Hotel, the front desk clerk was one of the Blind Dead from Troops of the Blind Dead. But anyway, this whole cemetery of ghouls is summoned to life by Dracula and the evil vampires, and they come to life and they look like skull-faced, and they're all dirty and dusty and crusty, and they have spooky skeleton hands, and they fight and attack people, and they rise up out of the grave at night, and it's a good sequence. And that's a cool thing too. So if you like The Blind Dead, you'll like this movie because it gives you some Blind Dead. And if you like martial arts and kung fu fighting and karate fights, you'll like this movie. And if you like vampires and spooky stuff and zombies and The Blind Dead, you'll like this movie. So big recommendation for the Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires mask, which sells, or did around the time I was recording this information here, for about 65 bucks, I believe, which is not bad. Pretty nicely painted. And I heard somebody say a minute ago, I thought gold paint eats latex. What about that it's got gold on it? Most gold paints do eat latex. However, I'm trusting that the folks at Trick or Treat, for crying out loud, know their way around mask paint, and I'm assuming that this is a type of gold paint that is safe for use on latex and is not going to eat the rubber away. This one has been in my home for a few months and doesn't appear the least bit sticky or anything, so I'm thinking that's not something we need to worry about, even though bad things happened in the past before people knew about the whole gold paint thing, such as the Dawn Post Gold Medusa that melted into tar. Or the, even later, who's the guy in Star Wars? Sebulba, with those beads hanging down from his, and he had things painted gold. Those rotted, and those were Dawn Post and rubies, but when they put the gold paint on there, all right. Let's just keep in mind that, let's keep in mind that "I see," said the blind dead as he picked up his hammer and saw